Warning: the following podcast contains graphic content that may be disturbing or triggering to some listeners. Discretion is advised.
10-9. Did you say Papa Tango Sierra Delta? 10-4.
There's so much left to do, so many things I wanna say, and I say, don't make the change. If it rains every single day, I'll fight to blow it all away.
Welcome to the first episode of the Papa Tango Sierra Delta podcast. My name is Larry, and I have been diagnosed with complex post-traumatic stress. When we avoid difficult conversations, we trade short-term discomfort for long-term dysfunction. There's a lot in that statement, and I think one that's going to resonate throughout the life of this podcast. I think the easy way to start things off would be to just talk about myself, tell you my story. However, I've never really taken the easy road. So I figure it best if you learn my story bit by bit as you work your way through this podcast series. I will say that I've been thinking about doing this for quite some time and I've been anxious about it. I've put it on the back burner for pretty much a year now. Just been really concerned about, repercussions from a lot of different places. I spoke to a good friend of mine about this. This is the guy that seems to be, no matter what shit is happening, can muster up a smile or at least chill me out. I'm going to read his response. I understand your concern, but your concern showcases exactly why it is so important for you and others to speak your truth. Humans find strength in community. We live every element of our lives in concert with other humans. Your desire to speak comes from a desire to heal, not just yourself, but others. There is both strength and beauty in that. It's simultaneously an act of courage and vulnerability, of looking after yourself while giving back. Your concern validates the importance of what you're trying to do. If you feel you would be hassled, it's because communication has not happened within that sphere, and that is a problem. What you are proposing is a step forward, but that step forward will expose the need for change, which is difficult for some people, and especially some groups and professions. But please know that while you may have concerns about that, you also will obtain admiration, respect, and most importantly, I think what you are doing is a vector for change. You have a real shot at using your experiences to help, and that is such a beautiful gift to put out into the world. You are what you are. That is a fact. Right now, in understanding who you are choosing to be a force for good. And for that, I know you have my respect and admiration. I can't promise you it will be easy, but what you are doing is good. That's why you can count on me and others to have your back. Welcome to the Papa Tango Sierra Delta podcast. Take a quick break. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning into the podcast. If you have experience with post-traumatic stress and would like to join me for an episode, please reach out to me. You can contact me via direct message on Instagram, PTSD_podcast, or you can send me an email at Papa Tango Sierra Delta podcast @gmail.com. Cheers. Okay, back from the break. Thank you very much. I am quite happy to welcome Mark Long, a good friend of mine, who is now with Cracked Armour. Mark started Cracked Armour, whose mission it is to raise awareness for PTSD, TBI, and mental health, and to support those who struggle. Mark, thanks a lot for joining, man. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Larry. I'm really looking forward to this. I'm excited for you.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate it. I'm anyone who knows Cracked Armour, which I'd be surprised if you're a frontliner or military corrections. There's so many that don't know Cracked Armour. You may want to start taking a look at Cracked Armour, ARMOUR.com. Mark, let's go back and just, before we get into the beginning of Cracked Armour, which is obviously what we want to talk about, but talk about your story, man. Tell everyone about you, about what led to creating Cracked Armour.
One thing I think is important, I've experienced in the past 5 or 6 years of doing this work is, in order to really reach people, I think, I like to have people put a face and a little bit of a background to what the brand is. I'm a Nova Scotia boy, grew up in Napa's Valley, grew up in a small farm. Mm-hmm. I grew up like your typical country life, playing sports growing up, going to school. Never really interested me growing up at all. Never dawned on me the idea of becoming a police officer or first responder. I had other dreams, but it's really ironic. My aunt was an RCMP officer, and she was one of the first groups of women to ever go through the RCMP, and
wow.
She had a massive influence on me. By the time I hit 23, 24 years old, I started seeing her at family get-togethers, and she would always kind of say to me, you ever think about applying to the RCMP? You ever think about being a police officer? And it never really interested me, I guess, because I didn't know enough about it. And it just so happened I was working at a hospital in Halifax, and 2 guys I worked with had just got done writing the RCMP exam, and they were talking about it in the lunchroom. And I was really interested in what the process was. A month or 2 later, like a lot of kids, I went and did the entrance exam, and it literally seemed like a flash. I literally went and wrote the exam to see what it was all about, and then next thing you know, I felt like I was at depot. And I know that sounds weird, but it was maybe a year and a half. It was fairly fast. And wow. I'm working down in the United States, making ridiculous money. I end up quitting my job, call my parents. They drive down. I move back to Nova Scotia. And next thing you know, I'm on a plane to RCMP depot to go through what was shockingly cold winter, which I never have experienced that cold like that before. But it was an amazing experience. People to this day ask me about police training. Do they talk about mental health in police training? And I'm like, nothing. At least when I went through, there was no talk of mental health and what to prepare for. And, this road to mental readiness courses you have now and all this literature about mental health and PTSD, it didn't exist then. You didn't hear about it. Yeah. I get stationed in Prince Rupert, BC, and I started my career off in the RCMP, and then I transitioned to Halifax Police in 2002. I worked as a police officer until 2016. Worked on the street. I also had 3 or 4 years where I worked in an office behind a keyboard for the Halifax Police, helping to implement a new record management system for them, but ended up going back to patrol around 2008. And I tell people, for me, at least, mental health was the death of 1,000 cuts. You were diagnosed with complex PTSD. I was as well. Yeah. I think most first responders, military veterans, when they say they were diagnosed with PTSD, or they don't know if it's PTSD or complex PTSD, and I ask them, well, how long were you in your profession? And they start saying 5, 10, 15, 20 years. I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty safe to say you have complex PTSD. It wasn't one incident usually for most people. I've never had anybody I've spoken to in the past 5 or 6 years. Usually there's 1 or 2 instances at work or calls people have gone to or things that have happened that really had a massive impact on them. But it's the death of 1,000 cuts, the trauma you see day in and day out relentlessly. The reason I say a death of 1,000 cuts because you get nicked a little, you don't notice it. You get the next day you go to work, somebody nicks you again, you don't notice it. But eventually you get too many of those and you start bleeding out.
That's a great analogy.
And it happens so slowly, usually, that those closest to you, and even myself, don't really notice anything has been changed or anything is changing. But you go back 10, 20 years and you talk to your ex-wife or you talk to friends and family who was Mark, 20 years ago, what was he like 10 years ago? They will talk about a very different person. Mm-hmm. Somebody who liked to joke around, somebody who was social, athletic, went to university. I felt like I was a fairly well-adjusted, normal person. And then things really changed for me around 2011, 2012. I really started to retreat from friends and family. I went to work and I go home and I literally felt like I spent my days off at home preparing for the next day at work. It's all I thought about. I couldn't get my mind off work. I couldn't get my mind off calls I had gone to, and I have no shame in saying this. I'm sorry, but it really bothered me going to calls and seeing little kids beaten up and women beaten up and people doing the worst things to each other and to themselves that you could ever imagine. Things like I explained to people, when you watch a movie and you watch a TV show, for most people, and there's a really gruesome scene or something really horrible on the screen, what's the tendency of most people to do is to look away. Picture somebody who can't look away they have to look, and they have to look hard because it's part of their job. You cannot be exposed to that stuff day in and day out without having an effect on you.
To add on to that, I mean, it's not just a matter of looking away. What people see on TV now, they're becoming almost more accustomed to. However, one thing you cannot ever replicate on TV is the way some of those things feel when you touch them, whether it's a pieces or whatever, and the smells.
I tell people I developed so many skills over my career that I never want to perfect.
Right.
You go to a call and it's an apartment building or a house. Somebody hasn't been heard from for 2 or 3 days. Family and friends are concerned.
Right.
How long is it before you step off an elevator or open a door before you know what happened?
Well, yeah, exactly. Not very long.
And you're saying exactly, and I didn't even say what it is. And people listening that maybe have never done the job with any of us, what are they talking about? The smell.
Right, exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
The smell.
Right.
Or just different signs. It wears on you, and it really bothers people when you have to deal with that stuff, and you have to see the most terrible stuff that you just can't wrap your head around. It completely warped my sense of the world. And so I literally just started retreating, and it became to the point where I wouldn't go to family get-togethers. I wouldn't go to social events. I wouldn't really do anything. Just as something as simple as let's go to Walmart to pick something up, or Costco. It was like, okay, well, I'll drive, but I'm not going to go in. Yeah. Why not? I just don't want to.
Yep.
I couldn't relax out in public anymore. I literally had my head on a swivel.
Yep.
All the time. And that's common, I think, for police officers and correctional officers. And we unfortunately have a unique job where people don't like us. A lot of people don't like us. And you're with your little boy or girl or your wife at a Walmart, and you're running into people constantly that you unfortunately have to deal with at work, and not nice circumstances. I just felt like I couldn't get away from it. I think part of the reason I isolated at home was I didn't want to run into anybody. I didn't want to see anybody. I wanted to completely try as much as I could to forget about work when I was at home on my days off.
Absolutely.
Because I wouldn't do anything but stay home. That's all I would think about, because I stopped doing all the things that I once would enjoy: sports, going for walks, spending time with my kids, my wife.
Before we get to your tipping point, what was some of the big symptoms, and I know you've said some of them already, but what were some of the big symptoms that you look back on now and go, yeah, this, maybe I didn't really notice it at the time, but this is what I was doing. One of which, like you said, is just not wanting to go shopping, not wanting to go around a lot of people. What other things were you experiencing? Just so, and the reason I ask is so other people who are listening to the podcast can get an idea of they may have a post-traumatic stress injury.
Yeah. I had a very difficult time sleeping. And I never slept that well because of the shift work, but it would get to the point where I would get off work at 6 o'clock in the morning after a night shift. And so one thing I decided that would be a good idea when I started hitting my breaking points was I became a workaholic. And when I say workaholic, on my days off and on my days of working too, and get off work and then go renovate houses.
Wow.
For 2 or 3 years.
So you need to stay busy.
Work 80, 90, 100-hour work week. Very irritable. Extremely irritable.
Right.
And I became impatient with everybody. I became impatient with friends. I became impatient with family. I became impatient with myself. I became very hard on myself. I absorbed all the shit that would be said to me at work. Unfortunately, after a while, you can only have so much hate thrown at you in your job from the people you're dealing with that I started absorbing that stuff. And something I'm very ashamed of that became a symptom was hate at work. And I don't think I've ever said that on a podcast. I don't think I've ever said that publicly, but I hated my job. I went from loving being a police officer, and I hated it. And I didn't want to go to work anymore. This is 2015. I'd never heard of anybody at work with PTSD, never had anybody talk to me about PTSD related to policing. So it never would have crossed my mind that that's what I was struggling from. And I finally go to a doctor and working myself into the ground, and just a complete mess. And they diagnosed me with anxiety. Simple solution: we get you on some medication. In a couple months, you'll be feeling tip top. Didn't even scratch the surface of the anxiety. It didn't do a thing for me, unfortunately. And took some time off work. Work was told by this doctor. It was the doctor they had sent me to, the psychologist they sent me to. He tells work he needs to take time off. We think it might be personal. He's got anxiety, this and that. Take some time off work. And then I go back to work. Go right back to patrol and go right back at it. But My home life completely blew up over the next year or two after that. My marriage suffered because of it, and I end up moving out. And fast forward, I'm in an apartment. I'm still on patrol. And although the calls, accumulate over the years, it was actually a suicide of a HRM volunteer firefighter. And that call, if you were to ask me, do you remember any point in your life or your career where you thought, okay, there's definitely something wrong here and it's really bad? It was that call.
Wow. Yeah.
It was that call. I tell people that suicides are what ultimately ended my career, and people that would probably assume that, well, yeah, I can imagine seeing that dead body. I can imagine seeing that gruesome scene would really upset you and traumatize you. And I hope this doesn't come across as sounding cold, but I tell people it never was the dead bodies or the suicide itself, the person that had the massive impact on me. It was the family members who were standing there afterwards,
right?
Or you go to their houses, or they come to the house, and you have to tell them to their faces,
that's right,
that their loved one committed suicide.
That's right.
And I tell people it's the screaming, it's the utter heartbreak, it's the little devastation of the family that I'd go home at night and it would haunt me, having to deliver to parents that their kid had taken their life, or delivering to the children, their mother, father, or to a husband, or to a wife,
yeah,
that their spouse had committed suicide. It devastated me.
Yeah.
It didn't devastate me like it devastated them. It devastated me because it broke my heart to have to tell people that information. And that call really had a massive impact on me. The reason I knew that things were bad is because, as horrible as the situation was, and people would be like, why would he do that? Because I have chaos going on in my own personal life, because I'm already struggling. What creeped into my mind in that call was, that's actually a pretty good solution.
Wow.
Maybe to stop what I'm struggling from.
Wow.
And I'd never, ever, ever had thought about suicide or not wanting to live. But that was the moment I remember thinking, and I had the legs chopped out from under me, and I barely made it through the next 5 months at work. And right before Christmas in 2015, a young girl committed suicide, and I'm the first one to call. And that was it. I never recovered.
No.
The last year of my policing career, I'm getting smashed out of my tree every night to get to sleep.
Absolutely. That's a common thing.
Common thing.
I absolutely know this. It becomes a very common thing.
Yeah.
And staying busy, when you were talking about earlier about working the second job, because ultimately I know I deal with mine a lot by just, if I'm busy, then I can't think because I'm focused on something else. And it's quiet times, it's down times, it's a period of relaxation, or what people would call vacation, where they can unplug. Those are the things that terrify me, because I don't want to live inside my own head.
Right. And when that young girl committed suicide, that Christmas, I just broke down, man. I broke down, and my spouse at the time wakes up one morning and wonders where the 3 bottles of wine are that we had gotten the night before. And I lie and say, we only gotten one. I mean, that's when she realized, like, you drank all of it. And I broke down and told her. And imagine, I live with this person, and I don't come home and tell her, yeah, I was at a suicide all day.
Right.
Oh, by the way, a firefighter committed suicide today. I was at that all night. So I'm just coming home, and how's work? What do you say when you come? What do 99% of people say when they come home from work? How was work? Fine.
Yep. Fine. It's fine.
Was it really fine? Oh yeah. So nothing happened? Well, bunch of dead bodies, just that.
Work stuff happened.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're not going to tell your spouse, who's a civilian or whatever. At least I didn't. I didn't want to traumatize them, tell them craziness had happened.
Right.
That Christmas, I break down. I said, I don't want to live. I don't want to be here anymore. I hate my fucking job. I do not want to do this anymore, and I don't know what I'm going to do. And she put me in the car, and she drove me over to our employee assistance program person, and in no uncertain terms, you're going to help him right now. And if you don't, I have no doubt he's going to commit suicide. I get diagnosed with PTSD. I have an absolute shit fight with my department, who not only cut my pay off when I got diagnosed with PTSD, I almost lose my house. I can't make my child support payments, not because I committed a criminal act, not because I'm on suspension. You have mental health issues and you're not going to come to work and you've run out of your shift time, we're taking your pay from you.
Wow.
And if people ask me over the years, which they have, why didn't you ask for help? Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? I said, you think I'm going to go to work and say I need to take time off because of mental health issues when I hear other officers make fun of people that have done that same? When you hear stories of absolute nightmares in the military, especially of what happens when somebody gets diagnosed. So of course now I'm not going to come up and ask for help. My worst fears became true. Not only was I completely embarrassed and ashamed at the time that I had been diagnosed with PTSD, but I now am basically unemployed.
Wow.
Of course, the ripple effect is anybody in that organization who heard what happened, who are also struggling, do you think they're going to come out and say they need help too? It was my friends, it was my family, and it was complete strangers who saved my life. Wake up. Listen to us. We're going to get you help, but you're waiting for a boat that's never coming, and you're treading water, and you're going to fucking drown if you don't listen to us right now. And 2 days after I got out of the Abbey Lane, I get a phone call that I have an appointment to go down to see Veterans Affairs, because I spent a whole 7 months in the RCMP. 7 months. That's all I had in the RCMP before I switched to Halifax Police.
There was a big change at that point.
Big change, because I all of a sudden am told in a room by this new disability case manager that I'm being sent to Homewood.
I personally, and I can speak, on behalf of many people I know, are quite pleased that someone did step in, Mark, because I'm well aware and didn't appreciate it necessarily at the time, but well aware that you were not in a good place at all, in a very, very bad place.
It was an absolute catastrophe going to Homewood. And, we're here to talk about Cracked Armour a little bit. Cracked Armour absolutely never would have happened if I hadn't gone to Homewood. I was absolutely hateful for the first week or two I was there. I was so angry. I was so mad at the world, and I didn't want to go to Homewood. I really didn't even think I needed to go to Homewood. I was so sick and unhealthy, I didn't recognize how bad it was. I look back now and I do, but I couldn't understand why my family and friends were so adamant, and my psychologist. Slowly, I start getting to know a couple of people on the floor. First person I become good friends with, a correctional officer from Newfoundland. You know him, Chris Oliver.
Right.
I get to know Chris, and we start hanging out and being buddies. But I tell people it's amazing the power of peer support, because back then in 2017, we go for walks around the hospital grounds, downtown Guelph, and, you talk about the regular stuff. You have kids, I have kids, you're married, you're a correctional officer, but then the real shit comes out. It's pretty crazy when somebody holds a mirror up to you, because up to this point, I'm isolated. I think I'm the only one that has PTSD. I don't know anybody else does. I feel like a big loser, and I feel like completely weak. And now I'm meeting this guy who's a really good guy, ex-junior hockey player, tough guy, great personality. And he's saying, well, yeah, I got the same thing. I have PTSD. Yeah. And all this stuff that happened to work. And then I meet another good friend of mine, Natalie Harris, who's a paramedic from Ontario. And she's been a huge influence in my life and is a mental health advocate, but I meet her at her worst. And next thing you know, you're in these groups with 30, 40 people talking, and all of a sudden you realize, yeah, the firefighter across you has PTSD, and the correctional officer, and the military veteran. But guess who else does? The teacher, and the nurse, and the doctor, and the civilian who's been sexually assaulted growing up, and the other civilian who's been in a car accident. And it literally hit me like, oh my fuck, it's an epidemic. And oh my fuck, every single thing these people are saying, it's like they're talking about me, but they don't know me. How is it possible? They're saying they isolate, they're angry, they can't focus, they don't sleep, they're an addict, they're this, they're that. And I'm like, I can't believe what I'm hearing. It opened up my mind to the fact that, one, I'm not alone, and two, as great as the hospital was for helping to get me off my substances at the time and help me in some ways, I thought to myself, is this it? We're sitting one night on a bench in the hallway talking to my friend Natalie, and I said to her, look at this. And I showed her a design I had on my phone. I'm thinking about starting a website where I can just basically share information about PTSD. Between her and my buddy Chris and another friend of mine named Christian, I start like every day. They'd wake up in the mornings and they would have text messages sent to them where I'd have a new design, another new design. What do you think of this? What do you think of that? And I came up with the name Cracked Armour. And I said to Natalie at one point, maybe I can make some T-shirts up and put this on those T-shirts and sell them to raise awareness with PTSD. I get out of Homewood and I go home in November, and I was better, Larry, but there's still so much more. So I take my visa and I go down and I put $6,000 or so on my visa, not having any idea if they're going to sell or not, and I'm all excited. He makes them up for me. They were great. I bring them home. I stack them all nice, and I put them in the closet and I shut the door. And that's where they stayed for 3 months.
Wow.
And I'd given 2 out to 2 friends of mine that were Halifax police officers, both off work for PTSD. Ironically, I'm waiting to try to find some other help, and I find a program in California called Save a Warrior, and how it was this American program that was being run by military veterans and first responders, and how they literally were saving hundreds of veterans' lives a day. And I couldn't understand, like, how could a program like this exist? Like, even the hospital at Homewood, it's well documented. They've had numerous people leave that hospital and commit suicide within weeks. And this program is being featured on CNN, talk about the fact that they haven't had a suicide rate, any suicides of anybody that left the program, and how successful it is. And I sat down, Larry, and I hate asking for help. I won't ask for help for all the money in the world. Up at that point, I wouldn't. And I send them an email, and I'm talking the ultimate grovel, the ultimate sucking up. I begged. I begged. I was bawling when I wrote them an email, and I said, I'm not a military veteran. I'm not American. I saw a video about a guy named Jake Clark on YouTube, and I'm a father of 2, and I'm 100% a complete catastrophe, and I do not want to live anymore. I don't know what to do, but I want to know if there's any way I could come to your program. And my phone rings. I look at my phone, and it says, Brian Haggerty, Save a Warrior.
Wow.
Los Angeles. And he said, listen, would you be interested in coming to Save a Warrior? And Larry, like, you want to talk about a life-changing moment? When? In 3 weeks. We have an opening. It's at Malibu, California. Would you be interested in coming to this? Larry, completely shocked.
Yeah.
And I said to him, well, I don't know if you know Brian, because I thought maybe he just didn't remember. I said, Veterans Affairs? He goes, yeah. I go, they're not going to pay for me. They said they won't pay for me to come. That's okay. We're paying for it.
Wow.
Just come down here.
Wow.
Just come down here.
Yeah. Wow.
We're going to pay for you, a Canadian who's not veteran, not military, not American. We're going to pay for you to come here. We're going to pay for your seat, and all you need to do is pay for your flight. My sister cashes in all her air miles and buys me a ticket without me even knowing, because I told her after I got accepted that I started having doubts. Well, maybe, because Larry, I don't leave my house. I'm not going to, I couldn't wrap my head around getting on a plane and flying all the way to Malibu by myself. I was more scared of getting on that plane and going to California than I ever was at any call I ever was as a police officer.
I understand. I do understand that.
I was terrified. I can't explain why. I think it's because I had so much hope that this program was going to help me. And I think I thought to myself, I think the reason I was scared, Larry, is I knew if this doesn't work, and it's the only program I ever saw that I think is going to work. If this doesn't work, I'm not coming home.
It's fucking terrifying.
I go to California, and I'm in a room with 12 other veterans and first responders, surrounded by shepherds who are also veterans and first responders, people that lead the program. And as soon as they start talking, from the very first day they talked to the last day they talked 6 days later, I'd never heard anybody like it. I'd never seen anyone like it. It was a life-changing experience. I became lifelong friends with the guys I was in a group with. My roommate, who was a police officer in Phoenix, Arizona, him and I still talk to this day. But at that program, it was Jake Clark who says to me one day, first time I ever wore a Cracked Armour hoodie in public, what's this you're wearing? And I just started explaining what it is. The day of graduation, he says to me, when you go back home, you're going to take those hoodies and you're going to start selling them. And I don't care if you only sell one, but I really think you need to do this. I go home, I build the website, I upload all the clothing to the website, I start advertising. This is what this is for. And did it take off? No, it didn't.
Okay.
I would sell one, then I'd sell two. And then this is the ironic part, Larry. To be clear, I love all the police officers I worked with in the past. I have such respect for all police officers. I have absolutely zero time for the management. Mm-hmm. Zero. What made it take off? Halifax police officers. Probably over the next 2 or 3 months, 200 Halifax police officers bought clothing from me.
Wow. That's amazing.
And what the blessing of it wasn't selling the clothing. It was people calling me, people coming to my house, sitting there, not just buying a hoodie, opening up to me. I go to a mental health golf tournament in Halifax. I wasn't really in the headspace to go to public events at all. So I decided to go to this public event. A couple of veteran friends of mine say, listen, you go to the golf course, we'll go with you. We'll set the table and help you sell your gear. We believe in what you're doing. Let's do this. And it was the first time I really realized, Larry, the impact that this clothing could have to help reach people was a lot of guys came by the table and they would hear my spiel of why I'm selling the clothing. And some people bought stuff, some people didn't. And literally 3 days after the golf tournament, 4 days after, I get all these messages from HRM firefighters saying things like, we're sorry we didn't buy a shirt from you when we had the chance, or we love what you're doing, maybe we can buy a shirt from you now, or sorry we didn't get the time of day, or this and that. And I'm like, what's going on here? Like, that's really nice. Like, they're all meshing me. And then one of the guys that organized the event and invited me to the golf tournament, I got talking to him that day, and he goes, well, one of our members committed suicide last night.
Wow.
And now it's really woken everybody up to what you're trying to do here. Yeah. There's a reason. Because this isn't the first time this has happened. And it proceeds from there, Larry. 2018, I launched Cracked Armour, and there's been a lot of ups and downs. I've shut it down probably 3 times because, like everybody, I have my highs, I have my lows. I unfortunately, it's something I can't stop thinking about because I've lost friends with suicide. I was also going to commit suicide. I see so many people struggling I grew up with that became first responders. I see so many people I've worked with. I've met so many civilians, and I have obviously a real passion for it because there is solutions to this. Save a Warrior is a solution. There's other programs out there that help. There's solutions, but obviously, like anything, we can't stick our head in the sand and hope it goes away when every day, because I do the work I do, every single day, every day I wake up, somebody across North America, mostly in Canada, email me or message me to let me know that their loved one, their coworker committed suicide every single day. And you don't hear about it in the news. There's no parades. There's no mention of it. Half the time, the organization doesn't say a word about it. The family doesn't want to say anything about it. And I think it would really shock people. I'm not saying nothing is being done about it, but the first book I ever read about PTSD was called Cop Shock, and it was written by a Canadian author named Alan Cates. And in his book, he said something that always rung so true to me. He said, if a Boeing 747 with 300 people crashed every single year in the United States for no explained reason, how long do you think it would be before they would ground all those planes to figure out why these planes keep falling out of the air? Yet in the United States, over 300 police officers kill themselves every year, and nothing's being done about it. It's not in the news. There's no mention of it. There's no parades, nothing. And the thing about me, Larry, when I got diagnosed, you know what terrified me? I only knew one thing about PTSD. People commit suicide from PTSD.
Right, yeah.
That's the only thing I knew. So I'm terrified that I'm now being told you have something that could potentially lead to you killing yourself. And people, it sounds like, well, Mark, it's in your control, though. Well, not when you're that sick and you're that lost, right?
Well, everything needs to be in our control. That becomes an issue. I know that.
Right, control
one of the symptoms is you have to control things because it's very scary when you lose the ability to control things, and that will freaks me out. And so it's not, for those who may be listening and not aware, it's not a narcissistic control of things that everything has to go by you. It just becomes an ability for you to protect things that are around you, to be aware of things that are around you, to make sure there are no surprises, there are nothing that startles. It's the ability to leave a room when you want, to know who's in that room. It's just controlling the situation.
Yep, 100%. Cracked Armour to me, I'll tell you why it's important to me. I learned when I was in California that you have nothing to be embarrassed about, that society should be embarrassed that they treat people this way after they've done so much to help society, and that it's important that you go home. You need to try to help your other fellow guys and girls that are struggling. You need to be open and honest about what you're doing, because if you're not going to be open and honest about your struggles, you're never going to get better, and you're never going to get the help you want. You know, I'm not being cheesy here, but I really feel blessed that people feel safe to share with me things that they won't share with anybody else. It's that connection. And that one thing Save a Warrior says all the time is, we don't ever heal in isolation, which means you're never going to heal sitting at home in your basement, in your garage by yourself. We heal in community. You create your community. And it's not just Cracked Armour. I'm one little organization in the cog. There's hundreds, and what really makes me happy is every day I see people popping up on Instagram creating their own PTSD programs. Do you know how happy I fucking was? I didn't clue in. I thought you just tagged me at the podcast. I'm like, holy fuck. Larry is making his own podcast. I'm like, I love that shit, because 2018, putting my neck out there and creating this website and saying, hey, everybody, I got PTSD and want to send me some emails? It was scary. And I love it when people say, hey, you've inspired me. There's a lady in Ontario who is a dispatcher who started her own clothing line called Unseen Voices. And she's a former dispatcher who's had her own struggles and like amazing clothing, but like to see all that pop up, that never would have happened 6 or 7 years ago.
No, but the reality is, Mark, I know you're a very grounded individual. You're a very humble individual. And you have inspired a lot of people, Mark. I mean, that is the reality, is that you, when it comes, at least in this side of the world and this part of the country, you are amongst the first ones that at least were vocal and were out there and let people know this is going on. And I remember, when I came to Nova Scotia and people were talking about you and telling me about you, and I mean, you had reverberated years ago throughout the profession that there was some things that were really wrong, and you were actually standing up to them. And when you talk a minute ago about you're getting messages from people, you're getting calls from people that just want to disclose things to you. I'm here right now on saveawarrior.org. And this is an amazing stat. The military warriors, these are from Iraq and Afghanistan with PTSD, of the 27% who are not seeking care. So 27% of those who came back from those wars are not seeking care. There's almost 80% of those not seeking care, either because they don't want to be perceived differently by others, or because they're concerned it might affect their career. Those two things resonate with me very, very much, as I know it did with you. Cracked Armour has become a huge, huge thing. And as much as you say you're a little cog, it's not about the size of the rock that gets thrown into the water. It's about the ripples it makes thereafter. And you, sir, have made a lot of ripples and have reached quite a ways to help a lot of people, more than you ever possibly realize. When I walk in to do a presentation and there's probably about 20 people in the room and 3 of those people are wearing Cracked Armour gear, that says something. I mean, that's one particular day, one particular moment at one presentation, and 3 people are wearing that day. I mean, you're making waves, my friend, and you're helping things. So as much as you love that I've got this podcast started, this is something that I've battled with for a while. I've been battling with this for almost a year now, about whether or not I should do this, about my comfort level, about talking. And I mean, I just really, I guess, came to terms with things maybe 3 months ago, where I just stopped honestly giving a fuck what other people thought. That it's okay to be injured, that it's okay to be a little bit broken. It doesn't mean you can't function because you're broken. You're not destroyed. There's other people, and you feel so alone. And as much as you said earlier that, you say these cheesy things that, you're not alone. Well, that's a fucking huge thing, is that you genuinely feel like you are the only one dealing with this. I'm was diagnosed over 2 years ago. I know I had it for a while, but not to the effect that I did. But when you do present it to your family, it becomes a huge issue. Nobody understands. Nobody gets it. Nobody seems to really comprehend what that means. Everyone freaks the fuck out because of some of the scary connotations that come with PTSD, such as suicide. I mean, because you have PTSD does not mean you are going to commit suicide. Does it happen a lot? Absolutely. Is it a huge epidemic and a problem within the people who are affected by this injury? For sure. But it doesn't mean that's it. And a lot of it has to do with actually seeking help or being helped, even if you're not seeking it, trying to make it that there's not a negative connotation about it. And truly, if there is, stopping to give a shit about it, because it doesn't matter what other people think. If you are struggling with this, it is because you have been to fucking hell, and yet you have managed to come back. And I feel guilt a lot. I feel shame a lot. I feel sadness, but it's okay. It's okay. And it's about people like you being there for everyone else, and like Jake down in California being there for everyone else who struggles with this and doesn't fucking understand it.
You know, Larry, I don't like doing plugs, but I am going to do a plug right now. I started Cracked Armour to raise awareness for PTSD, obviously, but there's another intention behind Cracked Armour. I've donated money to different organizations. I've helped, send kids to camp with the money from Cracked Armour. But the master plan, the ultimate plan, as you know, is I sold my house in Halifax a year and a half ago.
That's right.
And I bought the property I live in now in the Annapolis Valley. The reason I did that is because not only do I want to help people, but when I was sitting in Save a Warrior, and if somebody said to me, well, what was the crazy elaborate shit they did with you that helped you so much? Well, we sat in a room. We openly talked with each other. We shared our emotions and feelings. We unraveled the fuckery of what went on in our life. They did some amazing work with us, and we got better. There was no doctors. There was no therapist. There was people who've been through it, and they understood what they needed to do to get you to the other side of healing. Obviously, I want to help people. I work tirelessly every day, spending thousands of dollars on this property to try to get it ready. For example, we just bought a bunch of furniture that was hand-built by a firefighter in Prince Edward Island, because guess what? You can't find bunk beds for 200 or 300-pound men in regular furniture stores. Right. So this guy rips down old barns and houses, and he takes the wood and makes anything you want out of it. And I said, I need 3 sets of bunk beds that can hold 200 or 300-pound men, and I need a table that's big enough that 15 to 20 people can sit at it. He's built it all. And this year, this is the first time I've ever said this publicly, but this year I'm putting my first group of people through the program here. I like to think that I try to build a platform that includes everybody, because nobody has a monopoly on PTSD or trauma.
No. And
Larry, if I just bring people here, and the best I can do for 4 or 5 days is do yoga and meditation and talk and meet each other, because you know what Save a Warrior does? Not only do they help you when you're there, they've created like the biggest peer support group, because you leave and you're still in contact with these guys. And now I've got friends I can reach out to from Phoenix, from California, from Texas. How many times I've been struggling at night, and I pick the phone up and talk to them on the phone, because I didn't have that before. So that's where the magic is. And how much does that cost? How much does it cost to bring guys together or girls together for 4 or 5 days, do some work, and then they now have these connections with each other? Because what kills people? Isolation.
Yeah.
Being at home by yourself. Nobody understands. There's nobody to talk to. It's helped me, because even though I don't like to share when I'm not feeling well, even though I find it hard to say to people like, yeah, I'm struggling today, there's always somebody who will message me during the day, and it pulls me out of it. And it helps me, because, you know, it sounds terrible, but I guess misery loves company. You and I had a big conversation, I remember 2 months ago on the phone.
Yeah.
And
huge.
I remember like really loving that you and I had that nice conversation on the phone, and you just like opened right up to me.
Yeah. I think the thing is, Mark, ultimately I've come to a realization that, generally speaking, the people that I feel most comfortable talking about my injury are those who have the same injury, because I don't have to explain things. You understand already. I don't have to go through the whys. I don't get it. And I guess the other side of it is that you focus and you pay attention to things, and I sometimes worry if I'm getting a condescending eye at times when I mention that I've struggled today or I've had a rough day, but I don't ever get that from another person who struggles because they get it. Listen, man, I think the ranch is going to be absolutely fantastic. I'm so fucking proud that you've done this. I'm so fucking proud of everything you've done. You have overcome. Just not a word to say what you've overcome. The ranch is going to be fantastic. Anyone, I'm going to tell you what, man, fucking 39 days ago, I would have said that yoga is the dumbest fucking thing in the world, and I don't know why anyone would have any time for it. However,
it's hard as fuck.
It is hard as fuck, but man, just the breathing, the concentration, the strength, it's been quite amazing. And so for those who
100%.
Listen to Mark and you hear him talk about meditation and stuff, and I say 39 days ago because I have no issue making a plug. That's when I got my fucking Peloton, and that's been absolutely fantastic to me. The meditation and the yoga has just been, wow. Give it a try. Mark, the Cracked Armour, I mean, where can people find you? How do people support? How do people get involved? Those who want to talk to you about the ranch, how do people reach out to you, brother?
I have my website, crackedarmour.com, and there's a contact us page, and they go on there, they fill out the contact us page, they can tell me what they're looking for, I guess. Or sometimes you just want to ask about a hoodie or ask about where there might be some good resources. And I appreciate your words. I want to make sure that two things are mentioned before we go, though.
Yeah.
I realize that mental health and where I've gotten, I have been carried by my mom, my dad, my sister, my therapist, my doctor, you, all the supporters, complete strangers, people I've literally walked by the mall and somebody sees my t-shirt and starts talking to me. I never would have made it on my own. And I thought in my head, I got this. These people don't know what they're talking about. I'm going to get through this. I was really wrong. And that's the one thing that I feel really horrible for. There's so many family members out there who are trying to support the loved one with PTSD, and they have absolutely no training, no knowledge of it, and they're on their own trying to figure it out. And, Cracked Armour is not just about the people with PTSD. People need to understand that there's a whole team of people in the background that are supporting us. I know you have your wife. I've had a lot of amazing people in my life who've helped me. When people say, look, how do I support? I say, listen, just be there for them and try to steer them in the direction of what might help for them. Join a peer support group, go get therapy. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook. People buy a shirt. It's not just a matter of raising awareness. We're building the program here.
Listen, for those who are on, I'm just going to make sure I make this known because we likely have some American listeners. It's spelled the Canadian English way or the UK way. Armour is, so it's Cracked, CRACKED, ARMOUR.com, Cracked Armour.
One thing I will tell you that I'm excited about is we're going to be releasing a specific hoodie in the next couple of weeks for firefighters.
Nice. And
we're going to be releasing a couple hoodies specifically for all the female warriors who buy from me. So
it's fantastic.
I really hope that they're a big hit, and I'm trying to ramp things up now to try to get this branch up and running.
That's fantastic, man. I mean, obviously reach out to me or, just reach out. But I know I likewise fucking absolutely deplore asking for help, but I've realized that it is necessary at times. Mark, thank you very much.
Thanks, Larry.
To those who have taken the time to listen to the podcast, I really appreciate your time. I hope this got somewhere with you. Feel free to reach out to me. You can get me on Instagram at PTSD_podcast. You can reach me at Papa Tango Sierra Delta podcast at gmail.com. You want to send an email, reach out to Mark as well at crackedarmour.com. You can find him on Facebook and on Instagram. Just remember that it's either me or someone else really does have your six. Thanks.
Don't go away. There's so much left to do, so many things I want to say, and I say, don't make the change. If it rains every single day, I'll fight to blow it all away.